In a world where deadly gates turn ordinary cities into hunting grounds, the weakest hunter alive survives a massacre and wakes to a system only he can see. Every level makes Sung Jinwoo stronger, but the power meant to save his family soon draws monsters and enemies far beyond humanity. This is solo leveling. Armed hunters battle monsters near a gate while military forces watch from a distance. 10 years after portals appeared worldwide, only awakened humans can enter them and kill creatures that ordinary weapons cannot harm. Sung Jinwoo waits outside a low-rank dungeon in worn equipment beside healer Lee Joo-hee. He is infamous as humanity's weakest hunter, yet he keeps risking his life to pay his mother's hospital bills and support his younger sister. The raid party enters a quiet cave and fights small goblins while Jinwoo struggles to keep up. Even a weak monster injures him, forcing Joo-hee to heal him as the others joke about his terrible luck. After the dungeon boss falls, the group discovers a second stone passage hidden behind the chamber. Because their gate will not close until everything is cleared, leader Song Chi-yul asks the hunters to vote on exploring it. The hunters walk down a long staircase and reach an enormous temple filled with stone statues. A giant seated figure watches from the far wall, while armed statues line the room and a sealed door closes behind the group. Jinwoo studies a tablet carved with 3 commandments as the hunters search for an exit. The first rule orders them to worship the god, but no one understands what that means until a statue suddenly moves. A stone statue fires a beam across the chamber and kills a hunter instantly. Panic spreads as more beams sweep the room, and Jinwoo notices that the giant statue attacks anyone who remains standing. Jinwoo shouts for everyone to kneel, and the survivors drop to the floor beneath the statue's gaze. The beams stop only when every living hunter bows, confirming that the commandments are literal rules for survival. The second commandment orders the group to praise the god, and statues holding musical instruments begin moving. Hunters run toward them, while the weapon-bearing statues slaughter anyone who chooses the wrong figure. The remaining hunters crowd beside the musicians as the temple fills with an eerie performance. Joo-hee trembles beside Jinwoo, and several party members lose limbs before the second trial finally ends. A stone altar rises in the center of the temple for the final commandment. The survivors form a circle around it, but torches begin extinguishing one by one whenever someone abandons their position. The sealed door opens, tempting the terrified hunters to flee while Jinwoo realizes the altar requires a sacrifice. One after another, they run for safety, leaving Jinwoo, Joo-hee, and the badly injured Chi-yul behind. Jinwoo pushes Joo-hee toward the exit as the statues advance with raised weapons. Trapped beside the altar, he accepts that he will die protecting the others, and a mysterious blue message suddenly appears before his eyes. The surviving hunters remain frozen around the altar while the temple door stands open across the chamber. Every extinguished flame brings the weapon-bearing statues closer, proving that the final commandment demands people remain behind. Jinwoo watches injured hunters crawl toward the exit as panic destroys the group's formation. He tries to calculate the statue's timing, but his shattered leg prevents him from escaping with the others. Joo-hee refuses to leave Jinwoo and attempts to heal him while stone weapons strike the floor nearby. Song Chi-yul orders her to run, because her magic and future are worth more than staying with 2 dying men. Chi-yul prepares to remain as the sacrifice, but Jinwoo notices the old hunter still has enough strength to reach the door. He insists that the leader carry Joo-hee outside and leave him beside the altar. Jinwoo pushes Joo-hee away as she screams and reaches back toward him. Chi-yul drags the healer through the doorway while the last flame fades and the statues turn toward the lone hunter. The giant statue smiles as armed figures close in from every direction. Jinwoo remembers years of humiliation, repeated injuries, and the family depending on him, then bitterly regrets never becoming strong enough to protect anyone. A stone blade tears through Jinwoo while another statue raises its weapon for the final strike. At that instant, a blue notification appears and asks whether he accepts the qualification to become a player. Jinwoo reads the warning that refusal will stop his heart within seconds. With death already unavoidable, he selects the only available answer and accepts the system's offer. The temple disappears before the statues can finish him, leaving only a silent flash of blue light. Outside, the surviving hunters collapse near the gate without understanding why the dungeon suddenly begins closing. Association rescue teams enter the double dungeon but find an ordinary empty chamber instead of the enormous temple. No statues, bodies, or altar remain, and Jinwoo is missing from the place where Joo-hee last saw him. Joo-hee wakes under medical care and repeatedly asks whether Jinwoo survived. Her memories of the statues leave her shaking, while Chi-yul carries the guilt of obeying Jinwoo's final order. Investigators compare the survivor's testimony and conclude that the dungeon changed in a way current gate science cannot explain. Woo Jinchul quietly suspects that something important happened to the missing E-rank hunter. Several days later, Jinwoo opens his eyes in a hospital bed with his body completely restored. A transparent blue window floats above him, welcoming him as the only player able to level up. Jinwoo sits upright in the hospital while doctors confirm that every wound from the temple has vanished. Woo Jinchul tests him for a second awakening, but the machine still measures the tiny magical output of an E-rank hunter. A floating status screen follows Jinwoo around the room, even though nurses and officials cannot see it. The interface displays his level, attributes, inventory, and a daily quest with a strict midnight deadline. Jinwoo dismisses the required push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and 10-kilometer run as a stress-induced hallucination. He spends the day resting while the red countdown continues in the corner of his vision. At midnight, the hospital room vanishes and Jinwoo appears in a burning desert surrounded by giant centipedes. The system announces a 4-hour penalty quest and gives him no weapon, shelter, or explanation. Jinwoo runs across the wasteland as enormous jaws tear through the sand behind him. His weak body nearly collapses, but terror and repeated near misses force him to keep moving until the timer expires. The desert disappears and Jinwoo returns to the hospital floor without anyone noticing his absence. He finally accepts that the system is real and that ignoring its instructions can be fatal. Jinwoo completes the entire exercise routine the next day and receives recovery, stat points, and a reward box. The healing effect removes every trace of fatigue as soon as the quest is marked complete. Day after day, Jinwoo trains in the hospital courtyard and invests his points mainly in strength. Nurses notice his body changing, while he records how each statistic affects speed, endurance, and physical power. Gina visits her brother and is surprised by his healthier appearance. Jinwoo avoids explaining the system, asks about school, and hides the danger because he does not want his sister worrying about another impossible secret. A random reward box gives Jinwoo a key labeled for an instant dungeon beneath Hapjeong Station. He studies the location and decides to test the power that has been growing without any change in his official rank. The subway entrance seals behind Jinwoo in red letters identify the station as an instance dungeon. He equips a cheap knife and walks through abandoned corridors, filled with claw marks and scattered blood. Blue-fanged wolves rush from the darkness and surround Jinwoo near the turnstiles. His first attack is clumsy, but the strength gained from daily quests lets him overpower a monster that once would have killed him. Jinwoo watches experience points appear after each kill and realizes the system can increase his level permanently. He moves deeper into the station, determined to discover how far this unique power can take him. Jinwoo fights through packs of wolves in the dark subway tunnels while the system tracks every kill. He uses narrow corridors to prevent the monsters from surrounding him and steadily improves with each new level. The cheap knife snaps against a stronger beast, forcing Jinwoo to strike with his bare hands. His fist crushes the monster's skull, proving that his physical strength now exceeds what his E-rank record suggests. Jinwoo finds dropped equipment and learns that the inventory can store items outside normal space. He equips a better blade, tests the system menu, and continues toward a powerful presence deeper underground. A huge blue serpent named Kasaka rises from an underground reservoir and blocks the chamber. Its armored scales repel Jinwoo's dagger while its tail smashes pillars and sends concrete across the water. Jinwoo repeatedly attacks the same section of Kasaka's neck and studies its reactions. When his weapon breaks, he grips the wounded scales with both hands and forces the serpent downward. Kasaka coils around Jinwoo and tries to crush him, but his increased strength lets him resist the pressure. He tears through the damaged armor and kills the boss with a final desperate strike. The serpent dissolves and leaves behind a dagger, a venom gland, and other rewards. Jinwoo uses the gland despite its warning, trusting the system to reveal whether the item can make him stronger. The venom grants a permanent benefit while his abnormal status resistance cancels the dangerous penalty. Jinwoo recognizes that the system's mechanics can be manipulated, giving him advantages no ordinary hunter understands. Jinwoo exits the instance dungeon and finds police surrounding a nearby gate break. A giant monster advances through the street, while licensed hunters struggle to stop it without enough firepower. Standing behind the barricade, Jinwoo throws a broken sword across the battlefield. The weapon pierces the monster with tremendous force, allowing the confused hunters to finish it before it reaches the civilians. Jinwoo visits his sleeping mother and watches the machines sustaining her life. The hospital bills and Gina's future remind him that strength matters only if it can protect the family he has been supporting alone. At home, Gina notices her brother's broader shoulders and improved posture. Jinwoo prepares breakfast, tells her to focus on school, and quietly decides to earn money without exposing his impossible growth. A C-rank raid advertises an open porter position for the following day. Jinwoo accepts because official dungeon work offers both income and monsters. unaware that the recruiting party routinely sacrifices temporary members. Jinwoo arrives at the C-rank gate and meets Yu Jino, a nervous D-rank hunter wearing extremely expensive armor. Hwang Dong-suk's veteran party welcomes them only because regulations require a minimum number of members. The hunters enter a cave filled with insect monsters and force Jinwoo to carry their supplies. Dong-suk's men fight efficiently, but their casual cruelty and lack of a healer immediately make Jinwoo suspicious. Jino stays beside Jinwoo and shares water while the veterans joke about the weakest hunter. His equipment is impressive, yet his movements reveal that this is one of his first dangerous raids. The group follows a tunnel covered in webbing and reaches a vast chamber filled with mana crystals. A giant spider sleeps beside piles of dead monsters, blocking access to the valuable deposit. Dong-suk claims the party forgot mining tools and leads his men back toward the entrance. The tunnel collapses behind them, sealing Jinwoo and Jino inside while the spider begins to wake. Jino realizes the veterans intend to let the boss kill them and then return for the crystals. He raises his shield in panic as the spider devours smaller creatures and turns toward the two abandoned hunters. Jinwoo steps past Jino and draws Kasaka's dagger. The spider's legs stab through the stone floor, but his improved agility lets him slip between the attacks and reach its vulnerable joints. Jinwoo cuts through several legs and forces the spider backward across the crystal chamber. Jino watches the supposed E-rank hunter move faster than any member of Dong-suk's party. The boss sprays venom and charges through the cavern, destroying pillars in its path. Jinwoo's resistance cancels the poison, allowing him to keep attacking instead of retreating. Jinwoo climbs the spider's body and drives his dagger into its eyes. The monster collapses after a final struggle, and the system rewards him with levels while Jino stares at the enormous corpse. Dong-suk's party returns after hearing the battle end and finds both newcomers alive. The veterans quickly decide that Jinwoo's unexpected strength makes him a threat to their planned story. Dong-suk orders Jino to kill Jinwoo in exchange for joining the regular team. Jino refuses and stands beside the man who saved him, even though he believes the veterans will murder them both. A red emergency quest appears and identifies Dong-suk's hunters as hostile enemies. Jinwoo grips his dagger while the veterans surround him, understanding that the system now requires him to kill humans. Dong-suk's hunters rush Jinwoo from several directions inside the crystal chamber. His increased agility makes their coordinated attack look slow, and he disables the nearest fighter before the others can adjust. An archer fires through the dust while a mage prepares a wide-area spell. Jinwoo crosses the chamber, stops the casting, and turns the veterans' formation into a series of isolated one-on-one fights. Jino crouches behind his shield as Jinwoo eliminates the party with frightening precision. The system counts every death toward the emergency quest, treating armed hunters exactly like hostile dungeon monsters. Dong-suk backs against the crystal wall and offers money, mana stones, and silence. Jinwoo refuses because the leader tried to murder him repeatedly and would sacrifice more temporary hunters if allowed to leave. Jinwoo kills Dong-suk and completes the emergency quest, receiving additional stat points. The silence afterward forces him to confront the fact that becoming stronger has now required him to take human lives. Jinwoo and Jino leave the dungeon before the gate closes and report that the party died during the boss fight. Jino keeps Jinwoo's secret because the hidden hunter saved his life twice. Woo Jinchul examines the survivors and notices that their explanation does not match the condition of the dungeon. Without bodies or direct evidence, the association can only record the raid as a catastrophic accident. In America, S-rank hunter Hwang Dong-suk receives news of his brother's death. He studies photographs of Jinwoo and Jino and decides that one of the two survivors must be responsible. Jino meets Jinwoo in a quiet restaurant and proposes completing 19 raids together. His father will approve a new guild only if Jino proves he can lead repeated expeditions without casualties. Jino offers a large payment and explains that hired members can remain near each gate while Jinwoo clears the dungeon. The arrangement would give Jinwoo monsters, money, and control over anyone who might witness his strength. Jinwoo visits his sleeping mother and calculates the cost of keeping her under magical life support. The need to protect Gina and pay the hospital makes Jino's reckless proposal difficult to dismiss. Jinwoo accepts under one condition: only he and Jino will enter dangerous sections, and the temporary members will never interfere. Jino agrees immediately and begins arranging the legal team. The two hunters stand before the first of 19 C-rank gates with hired recruits waiting outside. Jinwoo enters confidently, planning to use each raid as private training while his official rank remains unchanged. Jinwoo races through a C-rank dungeon while Jino follows with supplies and a shield. The hired hunters wait near the entrance, unaware that one man is clearing every monster at impossible speed. Raid after raid ends without injuries as Jinwoo gains levels and sells crystals through Gino's operation. Gino proudly records the victories, while other guilds begin wondering how the inexperienced team succeeds so consistently. A reward key opens the entrance to a fiery demon castle that exists outside normal gates. Jinwoo enters alone and finds ruined streets filled with burning buildings, demons, and a system map divided into floors. A massive hellhound named Cerberus guards the first major passage and attacks before Jinwoo can prepare. Its 3 heads bite from different angles, forcing him to rely on speed and Kasaka's dagger. Cerberus activates a rage skill that doubles its strength and tears away a large portion of Jinwoo's health. He uses a full recovery reward at the last possible moment and returns to the fight completely restored. Jinwoo climbs onto the hellhound's body and drives his dagger repeatedly into its neck. Cerberus crashes through the burning street before finally collapsing beneath the sustained attack. The boss drops a key item and part of a recipe for the holy water of life. The description claims the completed potion can cure any illness, immediately giving Jinwoo hope for his sleeping mother. Jinwoo studies the recipe and learns that its remaining ingredients lie on higher floors of the demon castle. The enemies ahead are still beyond his current strength, so he reluctantly leaves instead of gambling his only chance. Back in the city, Jinwoo meets Gino and resumes the 19 raid plan. He hides the demon castle's existence, but becomes more determined to level quickly enough to obtain the cure. Gino explains that his father's corporation is preparing its own guild and expects him to prove leadership ability. He trusts Jinwoo completely, even though he still does not know how the system works. Jinwoo buys new equipment through the system store and compares its effects with ordinary hunter gear. The invisible inventory lets him change weapons instantly without exposing valuable items to other people. At the hospital, Jinwoo stands beside his mother's bed and holds the incomplete recipe information. He promises silently that the next time he enters the demon castle, he will return with everything needed to wake her. Jinwoo continues daily quests and raid clearing with a new purpose. Every stat point, monster, and completed dungeon now brings him closer to challenging the higher floors and saving the person who kept his family together. Jinwoo and Gino prepare another raid while temporary members gather near the gate. Among them is Song Chi-yul, whose missing arm and calm expression remind Jinwoo of the double dungeon sacrifice. Lee Ju-hee joins the same mission after a long break from hunting. She freezes when she sees Jinwoo alive and visibly stronger, then struggles to speak as memories of the temple return. The raid also includes 3 prisoners, escorted by Association Inspector Kang Tae-shik. Their presence makes the dungeon tense, but the hunters are told the criminals will only perform controlled labor. Inside the gate, Jinwoo keeps his power hidden, while Chi-yul leads the group through ordinary monsters. Ju-hee stays close to the veterans and tries to regain confidence after the trauma that ended her career. Tae-shik separates from the party with the prisoners and 2 association hunters. He reveals that grieving families paid him to execute the criminals, where their deaths can be blamed on monsters. The inspector kills the prisoners and then attacks his own colleagues to erase every witness. His stealth ability lets him move through the dark dungeon before the victims can call for help. Jinwoo notices that the escort group has been gone too long and follows the blood trail. He finds bodies in the corridor and realizes the murderer is an awakened assassin rather than a dungeon creature. Tae-shik appears behind the surviving hunters and tries to kill Ju-hee before she can heal anyone. Jinwoo intercepts the strike, revealing speed that immediately changes the assassin's interest. Chi-yul orders the others to protect Ju-hee while Jinwoo faces Tae-shik alone. The inspector recognizes that the supposed E-rank hunter is concealing a level of power far beyond official records. Tae-shik vanishes into stealth and attacks from blind angles with twin blades. Jinwoo follows the disturbances in the air and blocks strikes that ordinary hunters cannot even see. The assassin becomes excited by the unexpected opponent and abandons caution. Jinwoo uses the system's speed advantage to force him into the open and wound him repeatedly. Tae-shik admits that killing awakened people is the only work that makes him feel alive. Jinwoo rejects the assassin's excuses and prepares to end the fight before more members of the raid are murdered. Ju-hee watches blue sparks and blade trails flash through the corridor while Chi-yul shields the group. The outcome will decide whether the association learns about Jinwoo's hidden strength or records another unexplained dungeon tragedy. Jinwoo and Tae-shik collide repeatedly in the dungeon corridor, their blades moving faster than the others can follow. The assassin's stealth creates brief openings, but Jinwoo predicts each attack through sound and movement. Tae-shik uses killing intent to paralyze the weaker hunters and aims for Ju-hee again. Jinwoo withstands the pressure, closes the distance, and prevents the assassin from reaching anyone behind him. Jinwoo activates his own murderous aura and overwhelms Taeshik with the difference in strength. For the first time, the inspector realizes that the hidden E-rank hunter can kill him whenever he chooses. Taeshik makes one final charge with both blades and is cut down in front of the surviving party. Before dying, he asks Jinwoo to deliver a message, but the system treats the battle as another completed threat. Association investigators enter the cleared dungeon and collect the bodies. Chi-yul accepts responsibility for Taeshik's death, knowing that his age and rank make the explanation more believable than Jinwoo's involvement. Woo Jinchul questions every survivor and notices that Taeshik's wounds do not match Chi-yul's fighting style. He keeps his suspicions private, increasingly convinced that Jinwoo's official E-rank status is false. Juhee thanks Jinwoo outside the gate but admits she can no longer endure dungeon raids. She decides to retire and return home, choosing recovery over the fear that has followed her since the temple. Jinwoo watches Juhee leave and accepts that strength cannot erase what happened to the survivors. Her decision also reminds him that he is moving deeper into a world most people desperately want to escape. Baek Yoonho reviews reports connecting Jinwoo to several impossible incidents. The White Tiger Guild Master suspects a reawakened hunter, but the association has no legal reason to force another evaluation. Hwang Dongsu arrives in Korea and demands information about his brother's raid. Woo Jinchul refuses to hand over the survivors, warning the S-rank hunter that personal revenge will not be tolerated. Jinwoo returns to Geno's operation and continues clearing gates at a relentless pace. The contrast between ordinary C-rank monsters and Taeshik shows how quickly his power is outgrowing local threats. Geno celebrates as another successful raid while the hired members collect easy pay. Rumors spread that the temporary team never suffers casualties, drawing attention from recruiters who want to learn the secret. Jinwoo checks his rising level and sees a new system notification approaching. The next challenge promises a class assignment, suggesting that his growth is moving toward a role greater than simple physical strength. Jinwoo and Geno lead their temporary party through another gate, while the hired hunters remain near the entrance. Jinwoo clears the dungeon alone, and the group's record of perfect raids becomes impossible for major guilds to ignore. White Tiger recruiter An Sangmin approaches the temporary members and offers permanent contracts. He believes Geno may be hiding a powerful fighter and starts following the team to identify the real source of its success. Jinwoo notices the surveillance but allows the recruiter to watch from a distance. Revealing a small amount of strength may discourage interference while preserving the secret of the system and his ability to level. A new gate opens during one of the scheduled raids, and the team prepares to enter as usual. Jinwoo senses stronger magic than expected, but the official classification still lists the dungeon within their legal range. Geno organizes the paperwork and protects Jinwoo's authority when other members complain. His confidence has grown through repeated victories, turning him from a frightened beginner into a dependable partner. Inside the dungeon, Jinwoo destroys monsters before the temporary hunters can see the full battle. An Sangmin studies the aftermath and realizes no ordinary E-rank could create such damage. The recruiter reports his suspicions to Baek Yoonho, who remembers Jinwoo's connection to the Double Dungeon and Taeshik incident. Baek decides to observe personally rather than provoke a hunter whose real limits are unknown. Jinwoo completes another daily quest and distributes stat points with increasing precision. Strength remains his foundation, but he begins investing in intelligence and perception as the system presents more complex enemies. Gina asks why her brother is spending so much time away from home. Jinwoo reassures her that the new work is safer and better paid, hiding every injury and supernatural reward behind an ordinary explanation. Jinjo shows Jinwoo plans for the guild his father wants to establish. He imagines the two of them building it together, although Jinwoo has not decided whether public leadership would endanger his family. The 19th raid approaches, and Jinyo calculates that one more success will complete his qualification. Jinwoo is pleased by the progress but more interested in the class change quest now flashing in his interface. A system message announces that Jinwoo has met the requirements for a job change trial. The quest opens at a fixed time and warns that the result will determine the abilities available during future battles. Jinwoo leaves Gino with instructions to finish the administrative work and enters the new instance alone. A massive stone arena forms around him as armored knights begin advancing from every passage. Armored knights flood the stone arena and attack Jinwoo from every direction. The system blocks outside assistance and escape, forcing him to survive with only the weapons and abilities already stored in his inventory. Jinwoo cuts through the first formation, but each defeated knight is replaced by another wave. Their coordinated shields and spears test his endurance more severely than the isolated monsters from earlier dungeons. The knights drive Jinwoo toward the arena wall and break one of his weapons. He changes blades through the inventory and uses speed to pass behind the shield line before it can close again. After clearing the hall, Jinwoo reaches a throne room guarded by a single red armored knight. The silent warrior rises, removes his cape, and draws a massive sword with far greater presence than the earlier enemies. The system identifies the knight as Blood Red Commander Igris. Jinwoo attacks first, but Igris blocks every strike encounters with enough force to throw him across the chamber. Igris abandons his sword after noticing Jinwoo's damaged weapon and challenges him at close range. The knight's disciplined punches and throws reveal a level of combat skill Jinwoo has never faced. Jinwoo is repeatedly driven into the floor while his health falls. He studies Igris's rhythm, waits for a committed strike, and finally creates a narrow opening beneath the knight's helmet. Using a dagger from his inventory, Jinwoo pierces the gap in Igris's armor and refuses to release his grip. The commander struggles across the throne room before the repeated wounds finally bring him down. Igris dissolves into light and leaves valuable equipment behind, but the job change quest does not end. The throne room doors open again as a much larger army of knights and magicians marches into the arena. Jinwoo fights through endless formations while robed mages summon new soldiers from the rear. He realizes that killing the visible knights is useless unless he reaches the casters controlling the battlefield. The surviving army surrounds Jinwoo as his stamina reaches its limit. He uses every learned movement, weapon change, and stat advantage to break through the center and eliminate the magicians. A hidden timer expires after Jinwoo survives the final assault, and the remaining enemies disappear. The system calculates bonus points based on how long he endured beyond the original requirement. A new window offers Jinwoo the Necromancer class because his battle style repeatedly turned overwhelming numbers against themselves. He hesitates, expecting a combat class, but the system insists the choice matches his potential. Jinwoo rejects the ordinary Necromancer class at first, believing summoned creatures would interfere with his direct fighting style. The system responds by upgrading the offer into a unique hidden class called Shadow Monarch. The class change grants Jinwoo Shadow Extraction and Shadow Storage. Dark energy spreads across the arena as the bodies of defeated knights become possible soldiers waiting for his command. Jinwoo chooses the command word Arise and watches black hands pull armored figures from the floor. The fallen knights return as loyal shadows with glowing eyes and no fear of death. Most extractions succeed, but Igris resists the first attempts from beside the throne. Jinwoo concentrates on the command and finally raises the Red Commander as his strongest shadow soldier. The Shadow Army kneels before Jinwoo, while the system explains that defeated beings can serve him permanently. He stores the soldiers inside his shadow, making the entire force disappear without leaving the arena. Jinwoo returns to the city moments before a scheduled meeting at Jinwoo's school. His clothes are damaged from battle, so he uses the system shop to replace them before entering the classroom. Jinwoo's teacher discusses her grades and asks whether Jinwoo would allow his sister to become a hunter if she awakened. He immediately refuses, knowing how quickly even a low-ranked dungeon can become a death trap. Outside the school, student Han Song-yi recognizes Jinwoo and reveals that she recently awakened. She wants to quit school and hunt professionally, treating the job as an easy source of money. Jinwoo warns Song-yi that rankings do not guarantee safety, but she dismisses his concern because he is officially E-rank. He decides that words alone will not show her what a real dungeon is like. Baek Yoonho reviews Jinwoo's growing record and asks An Songmin to keep watching him. The White Tiger Guild is preparing a training raid for new recruits, creating an opportunity to place Song-yi under supervision. Jinwoo completes the 19 raid requirement and celebrates the success of their partnership. Jinwoo congratulates him, but the new Shadow Army and the unfinished cure for his mother remain his greater priorities. At home, Jinwoo experiments with summoning and dismissing his soldiers without alerting Jinwoo. Igris and the other shadows respond instantly, giving him an army that can fight while he protects people elsewhere. Jinwoo agrees to accompany Song-yi on the White Tiger training raid. He plans to frighten her away from hunting, unaware that the seemingly harmless gate is about to trap everyone inside a red dungeon. White Tiger trainees gather outside a low-rank gate while Jinwoo arrives with Han Song-yi. The recruits view him as an unnecessary E-rank escort, and experienced A-rank hunter Kim Chul assumes command of the expedition. The group enters a snowy forest instead of the expected weak dungeon. The portal behind them turns red and seals completely, confirming that the gate has transformed into a deadly isolated zone. Kim Chul divides the party and takes the strongest trainees to search for the boss. Jinwoo remains with Song-yi and the lower-ranked members, who are left with little food and almost no protection. Ice bears surround Jinwoo's group among the trees and charge through the snow. Before the trainees can react, Jinwoo summons shadow soldiers from the ground and lets them intercept the monsters. The recruits stare as Igris and the Shadow Knights tear through the bears without receiving lasting injuries. Jinwoo orders everyone to keep his abilities secret and leads them toward a safer shelter. Kim Chul's group marches deeper into the forest and encounters intelligent ice elves. Their leader Baruka allows the humans to pass briefly, while secretly judging them as intruders who should be killed. Jinwoo creates a camp and uses shadow soldiers to hunt food and patrol the perimeter. Songyi finally understands that even a training gate can become lethal, while the other recruits begin trusting the hunter they mocked. A massive ice bear attacks the camp and is overwhelmed by Jinwoo's shadows. He extracts the creature's shadow, adding a powerful beast soldier to the army and increasing his options inside the sealed gate. Baruka appears near Jinwoo and speaks a language the other hunters cannot understand. The ice elf recognizes something unusual within Jinwoo and offers to spare him if he abandons the humans. Jinwoo refuses Baruka's proposal and prepares for battle, but the elf withdraws before revealing his full strength. The encounter confirms that the dungeon inhabitants are organized enemies rather than mindless monsters. Kim Chul's party is ambushed by ice elves and suffers heavy casualties. The survivors blame their leader's arrogance, while Kim Chul becomes increasingly desperate and unstable after losing control. Jinwoo sends shadows to scout the forest and discovers the remains of the stronger group. He moves the trainees toward the survivors, knowing Baruka will eventually attack everyone together. Kim Chul returns with only a few wounded hunters and sees Jinwoo's group alive and well. Humiliation turns into rage as he concludes that the E-rank hunter must have withheld power while his own team died. Kim Chul raises his weapon and charges Jinwoo in front of the surviving trainees. Jinwoo avoids the attack and allows a shadow to strike the unstable hunter from behind before he can endanger anyone else. Kim Chul dies in the snow and becomes eligible for shadow extraction. Jinwoo raises him as a heavily armored shadow named Iron, turning the reckless leader into a powerful defender for the people he abandoned. Baruka and the Ice Elves surround the survivors near the frozen clearing. Jinwoo deploys Igris, Iron, and the Bear Shadow while ordering the trainees to remain inside the defensive formation. The Shadow Army clashes with the elves across the snow, but Baruka moves too quickly for most soldiers to follow. His twin blades repeatedly reach Jinwoo despite the protection around him. Jinwoo and Igris coordinate attacks while Iron absorbs the elf leader's strongest strikes. Baruka still controls the duel, forcing Jinwoo to rely on the entire army rather than individual power. Baruka attempts to break through toward the weaker hunters, but the Bear Shadow blocks his path. Jinwoo uses the brief opening to wound the elf and reduce his speed. The battle spreads through the frozen trees as shadows repeatedly reform after being destroyed. Baruka realizes that ordinary attrition cannot defeat an army sustained by Jinwoo's mana. Jinwoo traps Baruka between Igris and Iron and lands the decisive strike. The Ice Elf falls after refusing to surrender, causing the remaining dungeon monsters to lose their organized resistance. Jinwoo attempts shadow extraction on Baruka, but the elf's spirit disappears before the command can succeed. The failure shows that even the Shadow Monarch's power has limits tied to strength and time. The Red Gate opens after the boss is defeated, and the exhausted trainees return to the city. White Tiger officials are stunned that low-ranked recruits survived a dungeon that killed most of Kim Chul's team. Song Yi tells Jinwoo she will remain in school instead of becoming a hunter immediately. The bodies and frozen battlefield have finally shown her the reality hidden behind easy recruitment advertisements. Baek Yoonho confronts Jinwoo outside the gate and senses the enormous difference between his official rank and actual power. Jinwoo refuses guild recruitment and asks only that the survivors be protected from unwanted attention. News of the Red Gate spreads through the association while Woo Jinchul reviews Jinwoo's impossible survival record again. The hidden hunter can no longer remain unnoticed, making a formal rank reassessment inevitable. Jinwoo returns home with Song Yi after the Red Gate and reassures Gina that the training raid ended safely. He hides the deaths and sends his sister back to school without revealing how close the students came to disaster. Gino visits Jinwoo and celebrates completing the guild qualification, but his father remains unwilling to place the company in inexperienced hands. The two friends discuss forming an independent guild, instead of accepting corporate control. Woo Jinchul escorts Jinwoo to the association for an official reassessment. The measuring device overloads before producing a number, proving that his magical power exceeds the equipment's maximum range. Association employees gather outside the testing room as the result is repeated. Chairman Go Gun-hee recognizes that Korea may have gained another S-rank hunter and requests a private meeting. Go Gun-hee offers Jinwoo a place within the association rather than a commercial guild. Jinwoo politely refuses because fixed responsibilities would limit his ability to enter dungeons, level up, and search for his mother's cure. The reassessment requires a waiting period before the rank becomes public. Jinwoo uses the delay to return to the demon castle, where higher floors remain locked behind stronger demons and new system objectives. Jinwoo climbs through burning streets while his shadow army destroys demon soldiers. Igris leads the advance, Iron protects the formation, and the growing army lets Jinwoo clear floors much faster than before. A demon noble named Isil approaches under a white flag after Jinwoo defeats her clan's guards. She explains the hierarchy of the castle and offers information in exchange for sparing the remaining demons. Jinwoo accepts Isil as a guide because she knows the routes between floors and the locations of rival clans. She watches in disbelief as defeated demons become shadows and immediately join his army. Together they move upward through the castle, defeating clan leaders and collecting access permits. Jinwoo remains focused on the final ingredients required to create the holy water of life. Isil tries to learn why Jinwoo is different from other humans, but the system prevents her from explaining parts of the demon world's history. Their conversation suggests the castle may be more than an ordinary generated dungeon. Jinwoo reaches another major floor boss and deploys his shadows across the burning fortress. The victory brings him closer to the final level, yet the system warns that the strongest demon is still waiting above. Before continuing, Jinwoo checks the time remaining until his S-rank announcement. He decides to finish the castle quickly, knowing public attention will soon make every movement outside his home more difficult. Jinwoo and Isil reach the upper levels of the demon castle, where giant demons guard the final permits. His shadow army spreads through the fortress, while he targets the commanders controlling each defense line. The enormous demon Vulcan attacks with overwhelming strength and smashes shadows apart faster than they can regroup. Jinwoo uses their repeated sacrifices to study the boss and reach the weak points around its head. Jinwoo activates his speed, climbs across Vulcan's body, and drives his weapon through the demon's defenses. The boss falls after a brutal struggle, leaving another ingredient needed for the holy water of life. A necromancer-like demon named Metis fills the next floor with undead creatures and poisonous mist. Jinwoo sends Igris and Iron against the army while personally pursuing the summoner through the ruined city. Metis attempts to overwhelm Jinwoo with endless corpses, but the shadow soldiers reform after every defeat. Jinwoo breaks through the undead formation and kills the demon before it can create another wave. At the highest floor, Demon King Baran descends on a white wyvern and commands lightning across the battlefield. Isil retreats to safety, while Jinwoo deploys every available shadow against the strongest enemy he has faced. Baran's lightning destroys entire groups of soldiers, and his sword forces Jinwoo into a direct duel. Igris, Iron, and the Bear Shadow create brief openings, but the Demon King repeatedly drives them back. Jinwoo pulls Baran from the wyvern and continues the fight on the fortress roof. A final coordinated attack allows him to overpower the Demon King and claim the last ingredient for the cure. The defeated wyvern becomes a shadow mount named Kaizel, giving Jinwoo a way to travel through the air. Isil watches him leave after he spares her clan and completes the castle's final objective. Jinwoo combines the purified ingredients and creates the holy water of life inside his inventory. He returns immediately to the hospital, carrying the potion that may finally end his mother's eternal sleep. Jinwoo gently gives the potion to his unconscious mother, while the medical equipment continues monitoring her. For several tense moments, nothing changes, and he remains beside the bed without calling the doctors. Park Kyung-hae opens her eyes and recognizes her son after years of magical sleep. Jinwoo embraces her as the hospital staff rush in, keeping the system and the miraculous cure hidden from everyone. Gina arrives and collapses into her mother's arms, restoring the family Jinwoo fought to protect. The victory matters more to him than any rank, but his upcoming public announcement ensures normal life will not last. Reporters crowd the Hunter Association as Jinwoo's reassessment becomes official. Korea announces its 10th S-rank hunter, and photographs of the former E-rank survivor spread across every major news outlet. Guild representatives wait outside with contracts, money, and promises of elite treatment. Jinwoo walks past them because joining a large organization would expose his abilities and restrict access to the dungeons he needs. Cha Hyein notices Jinwoo at the association and is surprised that his scent does not repel her like other hunters. The unusual reaction makes the Hunters Guild Vice Master quietly curious about him. Jinwoo needs practical access to high-rank gates, so he applies for temporary mining work with the Hunters Guild. The staff assume the new S-rank is joking, but he insists he only wants to observe their dungeon operation. Wearing a miner's uniform, Jinwoo enters an A-rank gate behind the main strike team. He watches how a top guild organizes combat, collection, transport, and safety around monsters far stronger than ordinary raid targets. Cha Hai-in returns to the gate after forgetting her weapon and senses Jinwoo deeper inside. She follows the unusual presence and finds him standing near a defeated monster that should have threatened the support team. Jinwoo claims he only defended himself, and Cha cannot prove otherwise. Her suspicion grows because his calm expression and clean movements do not match someone participating as an ordinary miner. The Hunters Guild team clears the first dungeon level and prepares a second raid for the following day. Jinwoo volunteers again, hoping to enter the combat area if an opportunity appears. Foreman Bei recognizes that Jinwoo has no interest in mining wages and warns him that A-rank dungeons can change suddenly. Jinwoo accepts the risk because stronger monsters provide the fastest path to continued growth. Gino meets Jinwoo to discuss creating their own guild now that his S-rank status is public. Regulations require a guildmaster, vice-master office, and minimum staffing, turning their simple partnership into a legal project. Jinwoo asks Jinyo to manage the administration while he continues hunting. Jinyo accepts enthusiastically and begins searching for an office, believing their small guild can eventually compete with Korea's largest organizations. At home, Jinwoo shares a quiet meal with his recovered mother and Gina. The peaceful scene confirms why he avoided guild politics, yet constant calls and reporters show that becoming S-rank has changed the family's life. The next Hunters Guild raid begins, and Jinwoo returns as a porter instead of a miner. Deep inside the gate, an intelligent group of high orcs starts preparing an ambush for the unsuspecting strike team. The Hunters Guild strike team advances through an A-rank dungeon, while Jinwoo carries equipment behind them. Sun Ki-hoon leads experienced hunters, who expect a routine clear after the previous day's success. A high orc scout appears and deliberately retreats instead of attacking. Jinwoo recognizes organized behavior, but the team follows because abandoning an unexplored path could leave the gate's boss alive. The hunters enter a huge chamber filled with hundreds of high orcs. The exit closes behind them as shamans raise barriers, revealing that the entire path was designed to trap the raid party. High Orc General Kargalgan appears above the army and mocks the humans through magic. His presence overwhelms several hunters, while Sun Ki-hoon tries to keep the formation together despite the impossible numbers. The orcs attack in waves and push the tanks backward. Healers exhaust their mana almost immediately, and damaged weapons begin failing while Jinwoo remains at the edge of the battlefield. Sun Ki-hoon orders the support workers to stay behind the shield line and prepares a last stand. Jinwoo watches the party refuse to abandon one another, deciding these hunters do not deserve to die for his secrecy. Jinwoo steps into the open and removes the restrictions hiding his power. The high orcs turn toward him as the pressure in the chamber changes, and every hunter realizes the porter is the new S-rank. Jinwoo summons Igris, Iron, Tank, and dozens of shadow soldiers across the floor. The army collides with the high orcs and immediately relieves the exhausted strike team. The shadows reform after each wound while Jinwoo moves through the enemy commanders. Sun Ki-hoon and his hunters watch an entire battlefield change because one man finally stopped pretending to be weak. Kargalgan casts curses that reduce the human's strength and increase fear. Jinwoo's status resistance cancels the effects, allowing him to continue forward while the orc shaman grows increasingly alarmed. Cha Hai-in senses the enormous magical surge from outside the dungeon and rushes toward the gate. Association officials and guild members realize the raid has encountered a threat far above its assigned classification. Jinwoo orders his shadows to protect every injured hunter and begins climbing toward Kargalgan's platform. The orc general summons elite guards and prepares stronger magic to stop him. The trapped raid party gathers behind the shadow army as Jinwoo confronts the dungeon boss. Their survival now depends on a hunter who entered as hired support and revealed power none of them understood. Kargalgan unleashes a wide area spell that fills the chamber with destructive energy. Jinwoo shields the wounded hunters with his shadows and crosses the battlefield before the shaman can complete another incantation. Elite high orcs surround Jinwoo near the platform, but Igris and Iron cut through them from opposite sides. The Shadow Army's coordination prevents Kargalgan from isolating its master. Kargalgan enlarges his body and attacks with a massive staff, sending Jinwoo through stone pillars. Jinwoo recovers instantly, increases his speed, and begins targeting the shaman between each spell. The orc general casts gravity and fear magic in rapid succession. Jinwoo's immunity neutralizes the debuffs, leaving Kargalgan confused that abilities capable of paralyzing A-rank hunters have no effect. Jinwoo closes the final distance and defeats Kargalgan in front of the entire raid party. The remaining high orcs lose command and are destroyed by the shadows across the chamber. The Hunters Guild members stand among the fallen monsters while Jinwoo checks every injured person. His intervention prevents any deaths, turning an extermination trap into a successful clear. Jinwoo uses shadow extraction on Kargalgan and raises the shaman as a powerful soldier named Tusk. The new shadow retains devastating magic and immediately kneels beside Igris and Iron. Cha Hae-in reaches the boss room after the fight and sees Jinwoo's army filling the chamber. She understands that his S-rank evaluation still fails to describe the scale of his abilities. Choi Jong-in arrives with reinforcements and learns that the temporary porter defeated the entire High Orc force. He offers Jinwoo a position in the Hunters Guild, but Jinwoo declines without hesitation. Sun Ki-hoon thanks Jinwoo for trusting the team enough to reveal himself. Jinwoo answers that the Hunters' refusal to abandon one another made saving them worth the attention he will now receive. Outside the gate, reporters and guild officials gather as information about the rescue spreads. Jinwoo leaves before interviews begin, while the Hunters Guild struggles to explain how one recruit cleared an A-rank dungeon. Gino reacts with excitement when he hears that Jinwoo openly used his power. The event makes their future guild instantly credible, but it also attracts competitors, government officials, and foreign observers. Jinwoo stores Tusk and the expanded Shadow Army beneath his feet. With his mother's recovery complete and his abilities public, he turns toward building a guild that will let him choose every future target. Jinwoo and Jinyo inspect a modest office that will become their new guild headquarters. Jinyo handles contracts and equipment, while Jinwoo focuses on meeting the legal minimum without giving outsiders control. Gina suggests the name Ajin by combining parts of their names, and Gino immediately supports it. Jinwoo accepts the simple title because the guild is meant to protect his freedom rather than advertise wealth. The association confirms Jinwoo as Korea's 10th S-rank hunter during a formal ceremony. Go Gun-hee welcomes him publicly while privately warning that international attention will follow every major decision. Cha Hae-in visits the office and asks to join Ajin despite being the Hunters Guild's vice master. Jinwoo suspects another reason and decides to test whether she can defeat one of his strongest shadows. Igris appears in the training room and duels Cha with a blunted weapon. She handles the commander's speed and technique impressively, proving she is stronger than most hunters Jinwoo has observed. Jinwoo replaces Igris with Beru's future position unavailable, so he uses a stronger shadow challenge and stops the test before Cha is seriously injured. Her determination leaves him uncertain whether she came only for guild membership. Meanwhile, Korean guild leaders meet to discuss another expedition to Jeju Island. Previous raids failed against rapidly evolving ants, and the abandoned island remains a growing threat to the mainland. Japanese Hunter Association President Matsumoto proposes a joint operation using Japan's elite S-rank hunters. The plan appears cooperative, but private conversations reveal that Japan expects major political advantages from Korea's losses. Go Gun-hee asks Jinwoo whether he will join the Jeju raid. Jinwoo refuses because his mother has only recently awakened, and he has promised to remain with his family for a while. Jinwoo watches footage of the ants and notices their increasing intelligence and flight. Although he stays out of the official operation, he places shadow soldiers on people he may need to reach later. Gino completes Ajin's registration and celebrates becoming vice master. The guild has almost no ordinary members, but Jinwoo's presence alone makes companies compete to offer gates and sponsorships. Foreign hunters begin arriving in Korea for the joint mission, bringing media attention and rivalry. Among them is Japan's strongest hunter, Goto Ryuji, who wants to measure himself against Korea's new S-rank. Jinwoo remains with his mother and sister while the Jeju operation moves forward. He intends to keep his promise, yet the shadows hidden among the raid team give him a path to the island if disaster strikes. Japanese S-rank hunters enter the association training hall while Korean representatives gather for introductions. Goto Ryuji studies Jinwoo immediately, recognizing that the quiet new hunter may be stronger than the public evaluation suggests. The visiting teams demonstrate their abilities through controlled sparring matches. Korean hunters struggle against Japan's deeper roster, increasing concern that the joint Jeju operation depends too heavily on foreign support. Goto asks Jinwoo for a private match and the two step into the arena without weapons. Officials expect a brief test, but the pressure from both hunters forces everyone else to move farther back. Jinwoo and Goto exchange blows too quickly for most observers to follow. The Japanese hunter increases his speed repeatedly, while Jinwoo continues blocking without summoning shadows or revealing his full strength. Goto attacks seriously after realizing Jinwoo is holding back, and their collision cracks the training floor. Go Gun-hee stops the match before either hunter turns the demonstration into a lethal contest. The Japanese team leaves with Goto unsettled by the difference he sensed. He had expected to dominate Korea's new S-rank, but Jinwoo's calm restraint makes the result impossible to dismiss. Korean raid leaders review the Jeju plan using maps of the island and ant tunnels. The Japanese team will draw the flying ants away while Korea's strongest hunters enter the nest and eliminate the queen. Min Byung-gyu returns from retirement because the raid needs an S-rank healer. He agrees reluctantly, still carrying trauma from the previous Jeju expedition and the teammates who died there. Baek Yoonho promises to protect Min while Choi Jong-in prepares the assault formation. Cha Hae-in joins despite the risk, determined to prevent the island's monsters from reaching civilian cities. Jinwoo spends time shopping with his mother and Gina instead of attending the final briefing. The ordinary family outing is the life he fought to restore, and he refuses to abandon it for a voluntary mission. Before the teams depart, Jinwoo secretly places shadow soldiers within several Korean hunters. The shadows remain hidden and give him a possible exchange point if the raid becomes worse than the planners expect. Helicopters and ships carry the joint force toward Jeju Island under live broadcast coverage. Across Korea, civilians watch the operation as a test of whether the nation can finally reclaim the territory. Jinwoo watches part of the broadcast from home while his family relaxes nearby. He senses no immediate crisis and keeps his promise, unaware that a new ant far stronger than the queen is already moving beneath the island. Japanese hunters land around Jeju Island and release enough magical power to attract the flying ants. The swarm rises from the nest and chases them across the coastline exactly as the joint plan predicts. Korea's strike team enters the underground tunnels while Choi Jong-in burns through the first defenders. Baek Yoonho, Cha Hae-in, Ma Dong-wook, Lim Tae-gyu, and Min Byung-gyu advance toward the queen's chamber. The ants attack from walls and ceilings, but the S-rank formation destroys them quickly. Min heals minor wounds while the others maintain enough strength for the queen waiting deeper inside. Outside, Japanese teams separate into assigned sectors and eliminate airborne ants. Their communication remains calm, convincing the command ship that the operation is proceeding without major losses. The Korean hunters reach a vast chamber filled with eggs and find the enormous ant queen. Her roar shakes the nest and summons royal guards from hidden passages. Choi blankets the chamber in fire while Baek and Ma hold the guards away from the ranged hunters. Cha cuts through the queen's limbs and the team steadily breaks the monster's defenses. The queen releases a piercing cry that disrupts the hunters and calls every remaining ant toward the nest. The Japanese teams notice the swarm changing direction but continue following their secret withdrawal schedule. Min restores the front line as Cha and Baek launch another coordinated attack. The queen is finally killed, and the Korean team believes the island's reproduction cycle has been stopped. A dying queen produces a final signal before collapsing among the eggs. Far from the chamber, an unusually small humanoid ant hears the call and changes direction. The Ant King reaches the first Japanese S-rank group and kills its members before they understand the threat. Its speed, speech, and ability to sense powerful opponents reveal an evolution beyond all previous reports. Goto receives broken communications from multiple teams and orders a regroup. The Ant King appears in front of him, identifying Japan's strongest magical presence as the next enemy to eliminate. Goto attacks with full speed, but the Ant King avoids the strike and tears through him. Japan's strongest hunter dies within moments, leaving the diversion force without leadership or a way to warn Korea. The command ship loses contact with nearly every Japanese team, while the Korean hunters celebrate too early inside the nest. The new creature enters the tunnels, following the scent of the strongest remaining humans. The Ant King enters the queen's chamber and examines the fallen body before turning toward the Korean hunters. Its human-like voice and controlled rage make the exhausted team realize the true boss arrived after their victory. Baek transforms and attacks first, but the Ant King overwhelms his speed and strength. Ma Dong-wook's defense is broken immediately, forcing Min Byung-gyu to heal multiple fatal injuries at once. Cha Hae-in strikes the creature with her strongest sword technique and briefly wounds it. The Ant King responds with a blow that shatters her weapon and leaves her unconscious near the chamber wall. Choi fills the room with fire to create distance, but the Ant King crosses the flames without slowing. Lim's arrows and Baek's claws cannot keep the monster away from the injured hunters. The Ant King senses Min's healing magic and identifies him as the group's support. It moves past the defenders, kills the retired healer, and devours part of him to gain the ability to heal itself. Baek tries to reach Min's body while Choi orders a retreat. The team has no healer, Cha is dying, and the exits are filling with ants returning from the surface. Television broadcasts show confused aerial footage as the operation collapses. At home, Jinwoo notices that one of the shadows hidden on the raid team is surrounded by intense danger. Jinwoo checks on his mother and receives permission to leave after she sees his expression. She understands that other families may lose the people they are waiting for if he remains home. The Korean hunters form a final circle around Cha while the Ant King approaches again. Baek and Choi prepare to die buying seconds, unable to understand why the creature suddenly pauses. A shadow soldier rises from the floor beside the wounded team and becomes a beacon for shadow exchange. Dark energy expands through the chamber as Jinwoo activates the long-distance skill. Jinwoo appears between the Ant King and the surviving hunters while thousands of viewers watch the broadcast. His arrival instantly changes the pressure in the nest and silences the surrounding ants. Jinwoo summons Igris, Tusk, Iron Tank, and the full Shadow Army across the Queen's Chamber. The soldiers spread into the tunnels, protecting the injured humans and exterminating the returning swarm. The Ant King studies Jinwoo and asks whether he is the king of humans. Jinwoo orders his shadows to continue the rescue, then faces the creature alone in the center of the destroyed nest. Jinwoo and the Ant King disappear into a blur of strikes across the Queen's Chamber. The creature matches his speed at first, while the surviving hunters struggle to follow the exchange. The Ant King uses claws, wings, and stolen healing to recover from repeated wounds. Jinwoo increases his speed and begins landing attacks faster than the monster can regenerate. The creature tries to reach the injured hunters, but Jinwoo intercepts it and drives it through the nest wall. His shadows maintain a defensive line around Cha and the remaining Korean team. Tusk uses wide-area magic to destroy ant reinforcements in the tunnels, while Igris leads soldiers across the island. The Shadow Army reverses the battle that had overwhelmed two national strike forces. The Ant King releases its full killing intent and claims superiority over every human it has met. Jinwoo answers by overwhelming it physically, proving that the system's constant growth has moved him beyond ordinary S-rank limits. Jinwoo breaks the creature's limbs and prevents another escape attempt. The Ant King's confidence collapses as it realizes the human in front of it is not prey and cannot be defeated through speed alone. A final series of strikes sends the Ant King crashing beside the dead queen. Jinwoo kills it without allowing the stolen healing ability another chance to recover. The surviving hunters stare at the defeated monster while Jinwoo immediately turns toward Cha Hae-in. Her injuries continue worsening because Min Byung-gyu is dead, and ordinary healing cannot reach the island in time. Jinwoo attempts shadow extraction on Min's body and raises the healer temporarily. The shadow retains enough restorative power to treat Cha and stabilize the other injured hunters. Min's shadow completes the healing and looks toward Baek with a familiar expression. Jinwoo releases him afterward, respecting the retired hunter's wish for peace rather than keeping him as a soldier. Jinwoo orders the shadows to search the island for survivors and destroy every remaining ant. Kaizel and the flying soldiers carry wounded hunters toward the evacuation point. The live broadcast captures Jinwoo standing over the Ant King while his army clears Jeju. Korea sees the former weakest hunter accomplish what repeated national expeditions could not. Before leaving the chamber, Jinwoo looks at the Ant King's body and activates shadow extraction. Dark energy gathers around the corpse as he attempts to claim the strongest soldier his army has ever possessed. The Ant King's spirit rises after resisting Jinwoo's command and kneels as a shadow soldier. Jinwoo names him Beru, and the new general immediately shows complete loyalty to the master who defeated him. Beru helps the Shadow Army eliminate the last ants across Jeju Island. His speed and knowledge of the nest allow the cleanup to finish before another swarm can escape toward the mainland. Rescue teams reach the Korean hunters and evacuate Cha, Baek, Choi, Ma, and Lim. The Japanese casualties are confirmed, exposing the scale of the disaster hidden behind the operation's initial success. Jinwoo visits Cha in the hospital after she regains consciousness. She remembers his arrival and Min's shadow healing her, while Jinwoo avoids explaining the private details of his power. Go Gun-hee publicly credits Jinwoo with saving the raid and reclaiming Jeju Island. International associations begin requesting information, recruitment meetings, and possible cooperation with Korea's newest global-level hunter. Japanese officials face questions about the failed diversion and the deaths of their S-ranks. Their secret plan to weaken Korea remains concealed, but the country's hunter power has been devastated. Jinwoo returns home and shares another meal with his mother and Gina. The family sees him safely back from Jeju, though the attention surrounding their apartment has become greater than ever. Jinyo welcomes Jinwoo to the Ajin Guild office and displays the flood of new gate offers. The small guild can now choose valuable raids that major organizations once controlled. Jinwoo tests Beru against Igris and observes the new shadow's overwhelming speed, healing, and intelligence. Beru speaks respectfully and quickly becomes one of the army's highest-ranking commanders. On Jeju, cleanup teams discover traces suggesting the ants were only one part of a larger supernatural conflict. Powerful beings elsewhere notice the Shadow Monarch's growth and begin discussing humanity as the next battlefield. Woo Jinchul and Go Gunhee review Jinwoo's rise from E-rank survivor to national savior. Neither can explain his limits, but both understand that Korea's future security increasingly depends on his choices. Jinwoo walks through the city without the fear that once followed every gate assignment. Saving his mother and defeating Baru have completed his original goals, yet the system continues presenting stronger enemies. A new notification points Jinwoo toward the next challenge while his shadows gather behind him. He accepts that leveling has changed from personal